Hello, dear viewer. Today, I have prepared for you a story that will not leave you indifferent. Imagine a house where people whose relationships are more complicated than any labyrinth are gathered around a table, 3 wives and their 3 husbands, each with his own story, dreams, and fears. And the only one missing is Claire. This is the story of how they try to find a balance between love, trust, and freedom. But what happens when something unexpected intervenes in this complex relationship? What secrets lurk behind the closed doors of their home? Follow our story and you'll find out what it really means to love and be loved in a world where only you make the rules. Subscribe to the channel not to miss the continuation. Years later, I found her. Chapter 1. At my kitchen table sat a rather somber group of people. My 3 wives, Amber, Kathy, and Heather, and their 2 husbands, Mark and Jeff. The only one missing was our second wife, Claire. She was also my lawfully wedded wife. If that sounds complicated, it was. Polyamory wasn't as shady as it used to be, but we were still very careful. Careers could be ruined, family relationships strained or broken because they couldn't or wouldn't understand. That's why we were so careful. And if any of us got involved with someone outside the group, it could damage the infrastructure to the point of total breakdown. We had rules. One of the main ones was that if you wanted to bring someone else into the group, they had to be thoroughly vetted and the rest of us had to make sure they were a good fit. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, did not, under any circumstances, do anything with anyone outside the group. All sorts of considerations had to be taken into account, one of the main ones being the health of the group. Since we had all been around each other at one time or another in some combination, if one got infected with something, sooner or later everyone got infected. Our marriage didn't start out that way. Claire and I were married for about a year before she started talking about the polygamous lifestyle. She left articles lying around everywhere, and one day I came home and saw a copy of Ethical Girl on the coffee table. I read it. The woman spoke intelligently and lucidly about the virtues of this lifestyle. Then Mark, Heather, Jeff, and Katie started to come around. Not that Claire insisted on it, but she hinted rather insistently. Still, it took almost 2 years before they wore me down. I went into it with a promise to Claire that any time I said stop, it would be over and we would be monogamous again. Jeff and Mark were bi, as were Katie and Claire. Amber and Heather were straight, as was I, although I think Heather was considering it. Amber lived with us, Kathy lived with Jeff, and Mark lived with Heather. It was all mostly for appearances. The couples changed weekly. Sometimes Amber ended up with me, sometimes Heather. Occasionally Kathy, and of course my wife Claire. Now I highly doubted she'd be able to come back. In some respects, it was very good. If you wanted to do something, you knew who to call. Amber and I loved being outdoors, and we made sure to get out and camp at least 3 times a year. She also loved kayaking and fishing. We introduced Mark to fishing, but he decided he liked fly fishing best, while Amber and I caught whatever we could get our hands on. He and Mark even hunted, but that was enough for me as a youngster. I still enjoyed going to the shooting range to shoot skeet and targets. Amber wouldn't stop talking about skeet shooting, so most of the rest of us tried it. Now it was Amber, Mark, Heather, and me. They even bought their own guns. 2 28-gauge over-ander for the ladies, my 1100 pom-pom, and Mark bought a very ornate 20-gauge double-barrel, complete with rabbit ear hammers. The guns were stored at my house. Heather was the most urbane. She knew where the trendy restaurants were, where the latest gallery had opened, and anything that was current at that second. If you wanted a night out in any of the styles, Heather was your girl. Jeff loved woodworking and trade shows. I think his Lowe's card was adorned with a gold stripe. I had the largest house and lot, thanks to my late grandmother, and I gave him the use of one shed for his hobby and storage of his tools. The man had a lot of tools. I helped him from time to time if a heavy load needed to be lifted. He built my dining room set, a bedroom set for the guest room in my house, and a huge closet for Amber. I tried several times to talk him into the business, but he wasn't sure he could make a living and wouldn't do it. My wife was not an adventurous person, unless it was somewhere in the tropics and involved a 5-star resort. Then she was in complete agreement. Last year, we went on vacation as a group to one such resort and had a pretty good time. There were a few unpleasant moments. Claire got a little tipsy and flirted with a stranger so much that he was sure she was going to spend the night in his hotel room. He was a little annoyed when the group swooped in and took her back to the villa. She was hungover and apologized. I didn't talk to her for a while and the other ladies gave her hell. "You almost screwed up last night, girl. It took you 2 years to talk your husband into it, and you almost ruined everything. If you want weird, find it. But be warned, if you do, and we find out, you're out. No second chances. And as angry as we are, you better think about your husband. He'll dump you in a minute and the group will be gone, so we're interested in your behavior. Don't ruin a good thing." She must have seen the writing on the wall and stayed exclusively with me for the rest of the trip. She apologized. I clarified my position, and we put it behind us, I thought. Now it seems that wasn't the case. The guy wanted to object, but Mark was 6'3" and a gym junkie, and Jeff had his own set of muscles from his hobby. It was unlikely either of them had ever fought anyone in their lives. I, on the other hand, was a wild child who knew that when you fight, the only rule is to win. My height was 170 centimeters, and I wasn't fat. He kind of ignored them, but he recognized something about me and backed off. I carried Claire into the room and put her on the bed. She passed out after a few minutes. The next day, I had almost nothing to talk to her about, and the girls gave her hell for getting drunk and doing something stupid. She never apologized to me, but tried to show me she was remorseful. I don't think she had more than 2 drinks at a time for the rest of her vacation. And now, Heather thought she was cheating. How sure are you? She looked at me sadly. Not 100%, but pretty close. She disappeared for a couple of girls' nights out. Then she started skipping work, taking long lunches here, leaving a couple hours early there. I checked and she wasn't with any of us. You didn't notice anything? Not really, but then again, she's not here that often or that long with any of us. So it could have been pretty easy for her. Jeff asked me what I wanted to do. Remember the last time she did something like that? She didn't go all the way and do anything with him, but that was because we found out about it early enough. I think I'm going to call some friends who do surveillance. I'll tell you what, if she's flirting with someone on the side, I'll leave her, which means I'll leave the group. You were her friends long before she was with me, and I don't want to ruin that dynamic. Besides, the lifestyle is starting to get me down. Either way, I would have left a long time ago. It shocked them and silenced them. It took them a long time to convince me to try it, and I personally thought I was a fool for agreeing at all. I was desperately afraid that I would lose her anyway, and I thought that if we experimented a little, she would get tired of it, and it would be just the 2 of us again. I wanted to start a family and she wasn't thrilled with the idea. Maybe it was time to end it. Don't do anything rash, Jake. We don't know anything yet. Her physical infidelity really has nothing to do with it. Why haven't either of you had children yet? There was an awkward silence before Heather spoke. We made a pact. Neither of us were going to have children until we were 30. That made it easy. I want each of you to look me in the eye and tell me why this didn't come up in conversation when you were trying to talk me into it. Did any of you ask me what I thought about waiting at least 4 more years before starting a family? The silence dragged on before Jeff began. We were afraid it would interfere with your acceptance of our lifestyle. Besides, Claire told us she finally told you, and you were fine with it. Once again, Claire lied to the group. A strange thought visited me, and I forced myself to ask, "Tell me something. When you girls decided it was time to have kids, did you intend to have them with your spouse, or did you just get lucky?" There was a very long, very awkward silence that did me no good at all. Finally, Heather spoke up. We girls talked about it and decided that the first time would be exclusively with our husbands. Then we thought we could share to bring us closer together. They all kind of froze in anticipation of the explosion, and I didn't disappoint them. "Fuck you, son of a bitch, god damn it, get out right fucking now!" Heather and Katie were already halfway to the door. Mark pretended as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. I always liked Jeff better, and he thought I'd be nicer to him. "Jake, calm down. I didn't realize you weren't on board with the plan. I don't think Mark was, and I know I wasn't. But from the looks on their faces, the girls knew. We'll leave now and come back when you've calmed down." "Yeah, I don't think so. Don't come over. Don't call me. If I want to, I'll call you. I'll be staying at my house this weekend, alone. Tell Claire to go ahead. I know she's supposed to be with Mark this week. When she hauls her ass in, let her know the situation has changed. If she comes back to me, she comes back to me. No one else. Make sure she understands. And make sure she understands that it's not written in stone. A few sighs. I guess it didn't go the way they had planned. I was ready to give up that lifestyle as it was. Everyone has to live according to their moral compass, and mine was pointing less and less toward the life I was living. Amber didn't leave, but made sure she was out of sight. I grabbed a couple ciders, walked out to the bench under the pecan tree, and sat down. I was still there when it got dark, and Amber opened the kitchen door, shedding light on the backyard. "Jake, are you still there? I made dinner, honey. Please come in and eat." Amber was the youngest, at 22 when most people were 28 or 29. She was as sweet as could be, but she didn't graduate high school the best. In fact, she didn't graduate from high school at all. When I found this out, I gave her no choice and put her in an adult school. I didn't want her to have a high school diploma. I felt it was important for her to get a real education. I coached and mentored her, and the rest of the group helped her. She was the valedictorian of her class and thanked me by name in her speech. Her diploma hung in a frame Jeff had made for her out of cherry wood. I decided I was hungry, and we ate in silence. When I finished, I thanked her for the food and asked her one question. "You're the only one who isn't married in our group. Where did you enter the paternity lottery?" She lowered her eyes for a second, and then gave me the look of innocence I loved so much about her. "I was only going to have one child, yours. I knew that no matter what happened, whether the band stayed together or not, whether you and Claire stayed together, you would never abandon your child or her mother. Why me? Because you're the best of us, Jake. You're the one who takes care of everyone. All the other girls told me when we had our bachelorette party that after the first child with their husbands, you'd be the next. You know that if I ever do anything to either of them again, it'll only be under protection, right?" A tear rolled down her cheek. "That's what I thought too. Let me tell you this. If you and I end up in the same bedroom again, you don't have to worry. I will never try to lure you into a trap like that. Never. Do you understand? Well, while we're on the subject of true confessions, I think you're the best of us. You never say a bad word about anyone, and even though you're the youngest, you're the mom of the whole group. That tells me that when you have a child, he or she will never have to worry about being taken care of by a mother. You'll be the saber-tooth among the kittens when it comes to your children." She smiled the first time, and then became serious. "If you're the father figure and I'm the mother figure, we have to decide what to do with these unruly children." I smiled back. "Personally, I'm in favor of kicking them out of the nest and seeing if they can fly on their own. I'm serious about doing away with the group. I'm tired of having everything I need and nothing. I don't think that's the lifestyle I want anymore. Good night, Amber." I left her at the table as a tear rolled down her cheek. Around midnight, I felt her slide into my arms. "This may be the last time I share this heartwarming moment with you, darling. Why don't you just hold me for a while?" She fell asleep snuggled against me, and I lay there wishing I had met her first. Then I smiled. When Claire and I married, she was 16 years old. I woke up to someone fumbling in the kitchen. Amber was still in my arms, so it could only be one person. This was her week with Mark. Why would she be here? I knew the answer as soon as I asked myself that question. She was here for damage control. I wondered what she would think when she discovered my absence. I got dressed and went down the back stairs of the old farmhouse as quietly as possible. Opened the door quietly and stepped out. Old houses required special care, and I never could stand creaky doors, so I kept them greased and in good condition. I took my motorcycle, an old Triumph that Mark had helped me restore, and drove it down the long driveway, starting it up when I got on the highway. After driving farther out, I decided to go for a boat ride and maybe do a little fishing. We all bought a big pontoon boat together. Lugging it back and forth wasn't very practical, so we rented a spot at a local marina. I filled the tanks, checked the fishing gear to make sure nothing was needed, bought fresh bait, restocked the fridge, and set sail. I was going to head to the headwaters of the lake. There were never a lot of people there, which surprised me because the fishing there was very good. We usually kept the fish until we had enough to fry, but even though they were biting, this day I decided to catch and release them. I stayed on the water until noon, then headed back out, and the first person I saw when I got back to the dock was Claire. She smiled, but looked scared as she tried to hug me. Don't. What? Don't touch me now. But you're my husband. I have to touch you. The laugh was short and bitter. Really? Or am I just another person in your string of buddies? I'm really tired of this lifestyle, and I need to think about it. In the meantime, the best thing you can do is give me enough space to make a decision. Please. Yeah, it worked. Instead of giving me space, she piled her whole body on top of me. Crying and pleading didn't seem to help, and I just stood there with my arms at my sides until she finally stopped. When she finally pulled back, she uttered the classic phrase, "We need to talk." About what? Isn't it enough for you that I share you with 2 other men and a woman? How much time do you need to feel fulfilled? Obviously, you don't get enough at home, or with Jeff or with Mark. Wait, maybe it's the girl you've been with all night? It never occurred to me, but it's entirely possible. The possibilities are endless with you. She was out of her mind. I had never spoken to her so bluntly and cared so little for her feelings. Plus, she was starting to get nervous. There were people around. Please, Jake, let's go home and talk. I'll explain everything when we get there. I surprised her by agreeing and got on my bike, but instead of turning right and following her, I turned left and accelerated. When she turned around, I was already out of sight and could have turned onto any other road, so she went home to wait. I drove for 2 hours and ended up in front of my great-uncle's house. He was in his 70s, but he was still quite witty and always had good advice. He came to the door, grinned when he saw me, invited me in, grabbed a couple of beers, and went out onto the back terrace. We talked in generalities for a while, and then I admitted that I was having problems in my marriage. I didn't tell him about our lifestyle, but I told him that I thought she was cheating on me. He thought for a moment. You need to find out. If so, try to find out if it was a random act or a planned action. That will help sort things out. Sometimes people make bad decisions because of circumstances and regret what they did. And sometimes people make deliberate decisions and take risks. You need to find out if there was an affair, if it is still going on, and if the cheater feels remorse when you confront them. The trick is to find out if he regrets having an affair or if he's just sorry he got caught. When did you get so smart? He grinned. With age comes wisdom. That and years of experience. I'm glad you're old enough to realize that. We sat in silence for a few more minutes before he spoke again. You know, before I married your Aunt Clara, I was married to someone else. She was killing herself after 2 different men when I caught her and kicked her to the curb. Not because I didn't love her, but because her act was premeditated. It was planned. I was single for 4 years before I met Clara. I thought the sun and moon rose and set because of her. And then she cheated. It shocked me. Clara was the most loving and honest woman I had ever met. He continued. I think, given my history, you're wondering why we stayed together. It was a drunken one-time mistake. One day when I wasn't home, she went to a bar with her sister for a 1 drink. Her sister stayed, they continued drinking, and she ended up in the backseat of some asshole's car. When she realized what she was doing, she tried to get out of his clutches, but in vain. And then he threw her out of the car. I can't imagine the pain it took for her to tell me this, but she did. She left and went back to her mother's house. We were separated for 5 months before we got back together. Like I said, it was one time she was drunk and told me as soon as I got home. It was hard for a while, but then she never drank another drop of alcohol. She never spoke to her sister again. I guess it was her hobby to take her friends out on dates and get them to the point where they ended up in someone's back seat. About a month after this incident, 3 women jumped her and beat her up pretty good. Broke her nose. When it healed, she was no longer as beautiful as she used to be. After she healed, she left, and no one knows where she ended up. I thanked him for the beer and conversation and headed home. I wasn't too surprised to see all the cars in the driveway. She must have put out the "everyone get ready for work" alert. I wasn't in the mood, and then I realized I never would be, so I decided now was as good a time as any. The only one who made eye contact with me was Amber. She smiled sadly at me and made coffee. Heather decided to start. Jake, we can stop right here. Your presence here emphasizes the root of my problem. This was supposed to be a serious conversation between me and my wife, not between me, her, and all her cronies. There was a collective sigh. Katie looked indignant. You don't have to be so rude, you know that. We're not just friends, we're so much more. We're companions, lovers, sisters, brothers. We help each other. That's the whole point. You're there for each other. No one exists just for their soulmate. Face it, you're all doing this because you're afraid of being alone together. You have no solid footing. It's just shifting sand. I sighed. I know I have no right to judge you. After all, I was one of you, but I made my decision on the way here, and I realized I've been coming to this for a long time. I'm not happy, and I won't be happy until it's just me and one other person. Someone who can't run off to someone else if I get on her nerves. I think that's the part of a relationship, getting on each other's nerves, but knowing you have to stay and deal with it. You can't say that. I looked at Claire. Claire, how many nights have you spent in our bedroom this month? Enough. Enough for who? Not me. You've been home, or in what should be your home, 8 days this month, and today is the 27th. Even if you spent the rest of the month with me, that would only be 11. 11 out of 30. That's not marriage. Not for me, anyway. But we had a commitment. At first, we had commitments to each other. Do you remember them? Maybe standing in front of your friends and family with me, and the preacher might give you some thoughts. We've already discussed this. This type of marriage is outdated. Many more years will pass, and marriages like ours will become mainstream, and no one will condemn them. That's probably what's going to happen. But even if it becomes mainstream, it still comes down to choice. What happens if couples refuse this lifestyle? Will you force them to? You all know that will never happen. Maybe sometime in the future when dinosaurs like me become extinct. I suspect that will happen very, very soon. Heather voiced her opinion. We all love each other, Jake. I love you, just like I love Mark and Jeff. It makes us stronger. Have you heard the expression divide and conquer? That's exactly what we do, sharing time with other people and overcoming none of the obstacles couples face. Have you ever thought, how I wish I was with my spouse today, when you were with your lovers? And despite all the fancy descriptions, that's exactly what we are. We are lovers. We may feel sympathy for each other, but deep down we don't love each other. At least that's not my description of love. Immediately, protests followed. I just let them chatter until they ran out of steam. When they fell silent, I changed direction. Mark, Jeff, this is for you. If your wives came to you right now, today, and said they were tired and wanted to be exclusive again, would you be able to? I ask because you are a little different from me and enjoy moments with each other. Would you be able to lie next to your wife every night and not fantasize about having a good night knowing you'll never have it again? Kathy, how about you? Could you be exclusively with your husband and not fantasize about anything else, knowing that you are deprived of that for the rest of your life? The silence dragged on until Mark finally spoke, but we don't need that. I'm happy with the way things are. Everyone gets what they want, and everyone is happy. Heather looked like she was deep in thought. I think I was throwing ideas at her that she hadn't thought of before. I turned to Amber. What do you think about this? I'm just a +1. I don't have my own dog in this fight. I got into this because I was lonely and confused, and you guys befriended me. I've been thinking about leaving for months now. I'd like to find a man who only wants me, maybe have kids. My clock isn't ticking, but I think motherhood would be good for me. I think I was the only one who wasn't surprised. Amber was young, but she wasn't an idiot. None of this would have happened if it weren't for your wife. Heather was right. I looked at Claire, and she had gone slightly pale. How about it, honey? Have you been doing something with people outside the group? If you lie and I find out, we'll never be husband and wife again. If you hope to stay with me, you'd better tell the truth. She fiddled for a minute. It was nothing. A silly affair that I thought wouldn't hurt anyone. I'll put an end to this affair. You had 3 men and 1 woman and you still had to search? How many people do you need? It was Mark who spoke, and he looked really pissed off. You've exposed all of us. What happens if you pick up some nasty stuff, and you have to expose everyone you've been with to the medical staff? It's a small town, so we're careful when we go out as a group. We can explain away anything anyone sees by the fact that it's just a bunch of old friends having fun and flirting harmlessly. If we showed up en masse for testing, how long do you think it would take for someone to start getting interested? You've really messed this up. Needless to say, you need to stay home until we're sure we're not in any danger." Heather was also a little pissed off. "Why did you do this, Claire? We've been invested in each other for years, and now that's being jeopardized. If the band breaks up, I'm taking it out on your doorstep." Everyone fell silent, and I gave them a few minutes to gather their thoughts. "Claire, you were right when you said this was the end of the novel. Not what you've done now, but in general. This has been one big drawn-out affair. I like you all, but I'm leaving. From now on, I will only be with my wife, and if she can't do the same, we will part ways. Please don't make this any harder than it has to be, guys. I don't judge your lifestyle, and I still want to be your friend. It's going to be up to you. It's just not for me anymore." There was nothing more to say. Everyone was gone, even Amber, and she made it clear that all she wanted was to spend the night alone. Claire just sat there for a minute. "Can you do that?" She snapped out of her self-contemplative state and looked at me. "Do what?" "Be monogamous. One partner for the rest of your life. No exceptions." "I don't want to. Can't we?" "We can't. When we started this journey, I knew in my heart that it would end this way. But I tried because I truly loved you. But even with as many partners as you have, it wasn't enough. Oh, I'm sure you'll try and maybe you'll last a while longer, but the temptation will be too strong and you'll go back to your old habits. And just so you know, I'm not judging others, but I am judging you. You don't have one right bone in your body. I have a feeling you've been playing around since before we even joined the band. Let's save ourselves the hassle and just declare it's over." She was having trouble understanding what I was saying. For a minute, I thought she was hyperventilating, but she got her breathing under control. Claire spent the rest of the evening trying to talk me out of it, but by bedtime she realized I'd had enough. We didn't sleep together that night. She slept in Amber's room. I lay there trying to figure out how my life had gotten to this point until exhaustion made me fall asleep. The next morning she was already making breakfast, and I started to help. Old habits are hard to break, and that made me feel better. We ate almost in silence, and then she said she had something to do and left right afterward. I found out later that she went to everyone, looking for support. Apparently, she didn't get it. I wasn't very surprised when I came home the next day and saw that her things were gone. There was a note on the kitchen table. "You were right, we are too far apart to be together again. I'm sorry things turned out this way. I thought we had the perfect life. I was talking to the band yesterday and they all agreed that if you're leaving, I'm leaving. They're still mad about me leaving the band, and even though they didn't say it outright, they don't trust me anymore. I have taken exactly half the money from our accounts. I have no desire to cheat you out of anything except our marriage, I thought. And I know the house belonged to you before we were married, so it's yours. I'd ask you to let me take some of the furniture when I rent, as well as some memorabilia I didn't have room for today. I will always love you. Who knows? Maybe someday, huh? I won't count on it, but it's a nice fantasy. Claire." The group arrived on Wednesday. They had called ahead of time to make arrangements. They were still my friends, and all the trouble was none of their doing, except for the obvious ones, so I accepted them. We talked for a while and each expressed their regrets. Jeff said he'd bring the tools over by the weekend. Why? You're still welcome anytime, all of you, just as friends without benefits. I think it relaxed them all. We ended up making a meal together, and Amber sat down at the table with me. "Can I come home now?" "Yes, you can, but we won't be in the same bedroom. I'm still in contemplation." That's what I thought, but I want to be in my bed. She stayed for another 4 months. Oddly enough, I felt like I would be cheating if I was with someone before I was completely divorced. Amber found a nice apartment and decided she would be happy there. Jeff and Mark came over to help her move her bedroom. Her only regret was having to part with the dresser that Jeff had made for her. It was too big to fit in the apartment. I made her promise that as soon as she found a bigger apartment, got married, or even lived with someone, we would make sure she bought it. I got my divorce diploma in 5 months. Everything was very civilized. No yelling, no drama, no fights over property. Just sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. Congratulations, you are divorced. The group banished her, of course, and I wondered what she was doing for herself. But then I remembered how beautiful she was, and how she fooled around even before the divorce, so I doubt she lacked male companionship. Or female companionship, for that matter. A year later, Mark and Kathy divorced for reasons unknown, at least to me. One day, I asked Jeff if he had found anyone else to team up with, or if they were now alone in forced monogamy. He grinned. "It's not as small a town as you think. Heather and I are with 2 couples right now, and another has shown interest in our lifestyle. We're proceeding very slowly and cautiously, but things are looking promising." Well, good for them. Everyone deserves happiness and fulfillment, no matter what path they choose. When Mark left, Jeff and I bought out his share of the boat. He and I had a fishing trip planned one morning, and he called ahead to see if he could bring a couple friends along. I knew they were part of his new group and didn't mind. Bill and Fred were good guys, but they didn't know how to fish worth a damn. I took Bill and Jeff took Fred. We gave them a Fishing 101 tutorial, and by noon they were holding their own. Jeff told them a little about my history and they took a hint, but I told them I had left that lifestyle. And besides, I didn't have a partner. From the way Fred looked at me, I sensed he was willing to make an exception. They became fishing buddies, and then came to the farm, if you could call the 15 acres that remained of the original lot a farm. I was inclined to think of it as a very large lawn with a few trees. My cousins owned about 60 acres or so behind the farm and lived out of state, so I pretty much owned the place. I owned the barn, but not the pastures behind it, but I could use them if I wanted to. I never wanted to until Fred begged me to let him put his horses there, agreeing to pay the rent. He had 4 of them, and I thought it would be a good idea to keep the pastures under grazing so they wouldn't turn into brush. I told him he could, and I wouldn't charge him any money, but I wouldn't take care of them. Fred arrived with 2 horse trailers and a flatbed full of hay. He brought his family with him, and they all helped store feed and set up the horses. The rest of their group came too, and I was able to meet everyone. Besides Jeff and Kathy, Fred and Bill's wives were there, as well as another couple who had joined them about 4 months ago. They turned out to be nice people, and we got along well. The ladies went to the local supermarket, and I fired up the brick barbecue my grandfather had built 60 years ago for just such occasions. There was alcohol, but they didn't drink much, and as the day drew to a close, we all loitered around. Fred's wife, Sarah, happened to be next to me, and after a little conversation asked if I knew Claire Wilson. I was married to a woman named Claire, but that only lasted 6 years. As far as I know, she's gone. Do you know why? Not really. I didn't even know she'd moved until I was told later. If it's the same person, and I think it is, would you like to know why she moved? Not if it's going to depress me. I hope she's doing well, even though we've gone our separate ways. There was no hate at the end. At least on my end. We just reached a fork in the road, and she went left and I went right. She remarried after you, and she and her new husband were part of a group I was a member of. They didn't last a year before they disappeared. They weren't like us. I'd categorize them as something else rather than polyamorists. Things got out of hand when they gave us a little gift, if you know what I mean. It wasn't particularly nasty and was easily cured with a couple drinks, but because of what we had to go through, we voted them out. They didn't take it very well. The band broke up after that. A few months later, we met Jeff and Kathy, and then they brought Bill and Martha. We've been together 18 months now. Stan and Chloe are our newcomers. Tell me, do you ever miss it? Believe it or not, I like that sometimes. Not necessarily some bedtime stories, although that was great for the most part, but the feeling of being part of a close-knit group of people who you know have your back. You guys seem to have that, and I'm happy for you. It's just not for me anymore. She grinned. Well, if you ever change your mind, I have a sister. You'll be the first person I call. As they were leaving that evening, she informed me of something else. I need to tell you something else about Claire. I wasn't sure until I found out what kind of guy you seem to be. Claire and her husband joined a group of the very same people. A big group. Things got out of hand when a new woman showed up, without her husband. He wasn't happy when he caught her and burned the group to the ground. He had pictures and recordings that he put on the internet. There were some pretty powerful people in the band, and when they were exposed, it cost the couple their careers. Claire's new husband was the one who brought her into the band, and they became very uncomfortable. The pressure became so intense that they divorced. You should know that Claire is back home. I've been talking to her, and she's in intensive therapy, private sessions and group sessions. Her condition seems to be improving. Just thought you should know if you see her suddenly. I thought about it after they left. Claire was preoccupied. I checked her out, and the profile matched. I don't know if it can be cured, but I wished her the best. Years later, I found her. Chapter 2. Amber came to me with the same news. We kept in touch, and one day she called me with an important question. Would I walk her down the aisle? She looked simply stunning in her dress, and as I looked at her, I wondered where the shy and insecure child I knew had gone to be replaced by a competent young woman of sparkling beauty. Her husband seemed like a nice guy and was totally devoted to her. They had a baby girl shortly after they were married, and she was a sweet, well-behaved child. One day they came over so she could show him her closet and see if it would fit in her house. We measured it, and from the way he talked, I doubted it would fit. The baby saw the horses and had a fit, so I carried her downstairs, and when they piled up against the fence, she clung to me very tightly. I think when she realized they weren't going to eat her, she relaxed, rubbing their noses and giggling. I took her out to the pasture and put her on the back of Molly, an old mare with the gentlest disposition I've ever seen in an animal. I made her walk a few steps while she giggled. When we got outside, Amber tried to frown. Now all I'm going to hear is that she wants a horse. Well, I have plenty of pasture. Her husband Bob laughed and said, "They'll come back to me in 8 or 10 years. When little Belle went to bed, she told me about her meeting with Claire. I almost didn't recognize her, Jake. She must have gained 30 pounds, and it didn't look good on her. I invited her into the house, and we had coffee while she played with Belle. You know, if we'd stuck to the plan, I'd be almost as old now." She asked if I kept in touch with everyone, and I said I saw Jeff and Kathy from time to time. I had no idea where Mark and Heather were. She asked if I see you, and I said we are still close, that you walked me down the aisle and were the godfather of my child. Tears came to her eyes when I told her that you were doing well and that she should come and visit you. She wasn't sure she would be welcomed. I don't know if she was fishing or not, but I told her she should call you and gave her your new number. Have you heard from her? No, but she has no reason to be afraid. I don't hate her, though I hate what she's become. It's already water under the bridge now. I have no intention of having relations with her again, but I can tolerate her in society. If you see her again, tell her to stop by. Be sure to give her my words. I don't want her to come in with expectations. 3 weeks later, they came back, and Claire was with them. Amber was right, though she had told me before they arrived that she had lost a little weight and smiled more. But there were still a lot of wrinkles around her eyes. I took Belle to the barn, and she had a fit when she saw the little pony. Amber didn't know whether to smirk or complain. I wasn't looking for a pony, if that's what you think. Jeff had a friend who was moving out of state and had to get rid of her and his horses. He called me to see if he could bring them here and give him a chance to find a place to put them. He had moved to New York City, and after learning that it cost almost as much to keep a horse as it did to rent an apartment, he asked Fred to find them a good home. A white mare and a gray gelding are the new additions. You guys want a horse? Claire stroked the white mare, and I saw her first smile since she got here. Amber and Bob carried Belle into the house and left us alone. Why didn't you remarry? I haven't found anyone I want to marry yet. How about you? I heard that you and your new husband broke up. I'm sorry to hear that. Have you dated anyone since you moved back? No. I think I'm going to stay out of relationships for a while until I come to my senses. I know Amber told you that I'm going to counseling and that I'm getting help. It's weird that a woman who wanted to be with almost everyone is now celibate. I stay away from bars and compromising situations because I know how easy it would be to snap back. The excitement of meeting someone new is as strong as an alcoholic craving a drink or a drug addict looking for a fresh fix. She was silent for a second, and when we came to our senses, she asked me a question that I knew was coming. Jake, do you think we could spend time together again? Just so you know that if we do, you won't get any, at least not for a while. I gave her a moment. This is a bad idea, Claire. There's too much baggage. I don't think we can overcome the ghosts of the past, and I don't see a good ending. A small tear rolled down her cheek, but she smiled. I thought so, but I had to ask one more thing. Since you seem to have extra horses, can I come and ride sometimes? I used to ride the trails when we moved, and it was one of the few times I didn't think about the past. Take the white mare. She is well trained and has a good temperament. I lay in my empty bed that night and thought about it, remembering the nights we had spent together. Then I thought of the nights she had undoubtedly spent with the rest of the group and strangers. She surprised me by coming the next week. I didn't even know she was there until I saw her car at the barn. She drove around for about an hour and then drove off. A couple weeks later, if I wasn't busy, I'd saddle up the Gray and ride with her. Gray was fearful when he was first brought in. Jeff said his friend had him for a short time and he was very poorly trained. I read books, watched training videos on YouTube, and made him my project. I made mistakes but learned from them, and pretty soon we became buddies. He still wouldn't let anyone ride him, so most people left him alone. We talked more during these trips than we had during our entire marriage. We would never be lovers again, but we became very good friends. One day she came on a date with another woman. She was a little older and acted stiff around me, but after she watched us chat, she relaxed. Her name was Polly, and a month after we met, she came alone. I want to talk to you about something. Claire and I have started to have feelings for each other. Do you think it could go anywhere? I think you're asking her, not me. I know she likes you a lot. Do you know her story? Most of it, she says she's changed. The question is, do you think she's changed, and are you willing to take the risk of finding out? I think so, and I'm willing to put enough into myself to find out. Believe it or not, that's not why I came out here. How many booths do you have available? Can I rent one? I know we can ride yours, and you gave Claire's mare away, but I need my own. If you agree, will you help me find one? I wondered for a moment. My house and lot 75 years ago were part of a huge dairy farm, and my barn was huge. A local historian came to see me once and said it was the largest in the county. An empty stall should not have been a problem. No, but only because I'm not the expert you're looking for. Let me introduce you to my buddy, Jeff. I called Jeff and explained the situation. He didn't know whether to laugh or lose his temper. Let me get this situation straight. You want me to find your ex-wife's lover a horse she can keep in your barn so they can come over and ride? You're a tough dude, bro. Count me in. Jeff and Kathy met Polly, and they started a relationship. Pretty soon they became part of our group, but only in a social sense. Everyone almost always ended up at my house on Saturday mornings to clean the stalls and ride for a bit, then disperse to their respective homes. Amber and Bob would come over from time to time and the ladies would drool over Bella. I guess it triggered their own instincts because 6 months later Katie and Holly got pregnant. I was dating a woman I really liked, and she would sometimes come over when they were there. We didn't say anything to her about the group dynamic, but she didn't seem to like anyone, especially Claire and Amber. What bothered me was that the horses didn't like her, including Molly, and everyone liked this old lady. We lasted about 4 months, after which we decided our life goals didn't align and went our separate ways. By then, Bella was 4 years old and had her own saddle. I absolutely would not let her get in the saddle unless she wore the helmet I had given her, with the neck protector. Bob had his eye on one of those equestrian airbags, but couldn't find one small enough. We let her ride with us if we were going slow. One of us always held the rope in case of emergencies. She almost always fell asleep in front of someone halfway through the ride, usually me. If it wasn't me, it was Polly, which surprised her unspeakably. Now, on the nightstand next to their bed, is a picture of Belle, Claire, and Polly cuddled up in a hammock. The kid has enough aunts and uncles to make a team for almost any sport. Fast forward 12 years. I was sitting in the bleachers with my wife watching our child compete in her favorite equestrian events. In fact, they were all her favorites. The only thing I didn't like was the jumping, especially in the steeplechase. She may be 17, but she'd inherited her mother's slight figure, and the thought of tons of horseflesh rumbling around her while she jumped scared the hell out of me. After the competition was over, she came to the bleachers to cheer on her 11-year-old sister. She hugged Amber and then jumped into my lap and gave me a big kiss. I think I did pretty good, Daddy. I think you do too, Belle. Let's hope the judges think so too. So how did it happen? About a year after everyone started skating, Amber came to me and said she thought Bob was acting a little strange. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. I tried to assure her that it was nothing, but I promised I would talk to him. She left, and I went down to the barn. I had gotten into the habit of checking on them at night after a stray dog had followed them. He had died prematurely at 12-gauge muzzle, but I was still vigilant. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my own dog, a Pyrenean that I had gotten to watch the horses, seemed tense. I went back into the house, grabbed my shotgun, walked out the front door, and slipped away from the barn. Halfway down the driveway, I came across 2 cars and recognized them immediately. My blood pressure rose and I decided to just wait by their cars. 30 minutes later, they came down the driveway, giggling and holding hands. They kissed hard by their cars and were about to go in different directions when I spoke up from the darkness. "Bob, Haley, nice night, huh?" Haley shouted. She was the wife of Lester, the latest addition to their group. I felt like they were getting too unwieldy, but it was none of my business. Each new addition exponentially increased the chances of them being exposed. Jeff's wife was a school teacher, and Bill's wife was a nurse, and they really couldn't afford to let their private business go public. Lester was a police officer, a shift sergeant in a state trooper unit. He was on an upward trajectory, and something like this could ruin his career. Haley started babbling something, and Bob was silent. I let her babble for a moment before I stopped her. You know that you guys are on the verge of ruining a lot of lives, right? If this gets out, the whole group is in danger. Bob, you're an asshole. Amber doesn't deserve this. How could you do this to her? It's her own fault. I've been trying for almost a year to get her to join the group. She said she's already been there and done that and doesn't want to do it again. Even if she doesn't need the experience, I do. She's just selfish. You're full of shit, no doubt about it. Are you willing to risk your family for this? Trust me, when Amber finds out, she'll dump your ass in a second. Is that really what you want? Maybe we should break up. I'm ready to expand my horizons. And if she's not with us, I'll find someone else. I hit him. In the darkness, he didn't see me hit him right in the jaw. He dropped like a stone. Haley screamed again. Perhaps you shouldn't make so much noise. Someone might come over and see what's going on. There would be no one there. I was at the end of a long driveway, and I had no neighbors, but she didn't know that. That alerted her at once. Go home, Haley. Go home and think about what you've done. It's bad enough in a normal marriage, but in your case, it's much worse. You didn't just betray your husband today, you betrayed 4 people. What do you think Lester will do if he finds out? If I even suspect you're doing it again, I'll destroy your world. Do you understand? That's it. Nothing more. Say it. No more, Jake, I promise. Right now, your promises don't carry much weight. One more thing. Was it the first time? Don't lie. She admitted it was the 5th time, and 3 of them in the barn. Then, on her way out, she threw gravel on Bob. As for Bob, I left him to lie. Let him tell Amber some story about how he was wronged. Maybe she'll see right through him. I meant what I told her all those years ago. She was the best of us. I was glad at least one of us had found our happiness, and now it was a lie. The next day, Amber called me with bad news. Bob had been mugged outside the sports bar where he was watching the game. He'd been doing that a lot lately, saying he knew how much she hated baseball and didn't want to hurt her. He had a big screen TV in his man cave, but Amber let him go, figuring it was good for him to go out with his friends once in a while. How badly is he hurt? Do the police have any suspects? He didn't bother to call the police. When he came to, they were gone, and he had no idea what they looked like. Something must have scared them off because they didn't even take his wallet. He got a bunch of scratches and a swollen jaw. I told him he should watch the next game at home. Sounds like a good plan. Keep an eye on him, just in case. He could be concussed or something. I tried to talk him into going to the hospital, but you know how stubborn he is. I know. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for him. What does that mean? It means he needs to prioritize. What would happen to you and Belle if he was killed? He won't be killed. Besides, we have you. You'll take care of us. I would, and you know it. Let's not let that happen. Give him my words. He has something to live for. Thanks, Jake. Love you. I love you too, baby. See you soon. I pondered it, and everyone noticed it. The only time I really smiled was when Belle was climbing on top of me. Katie put what everyone was thinking into words. Jesus, Jake, you act like someone ran over your dog. What the hell is wrong with you? Never mind that. You have a date on Saturday. She's my cousin and she doesn't know about our lifestyle. She just moved here and she's staying with us until she finds a place. Ask her out, buy her wine and dine. Maybe you'll get lucky. If you ask her out, I know we will. Try to talk her into staying. She grinned. Don't think it's a sacrifice. The girl's hot. I had nothing better to do, so I asked her out and surprisingly had a good time. She stayed the night and we went out a few more times until we realized the spark just wasn't there. Amber took great offense to me. Why can't you find a nice girl? I kissed her. Yes, and she's married to someone else. She grinned and poked me with her finger. That ship has sailed. You had your chance. It took me a long time to get over you. We'll keep looking, won't we, Bob? He didn't look me in the eye when he answered. You got it, baby. The sooner we get him married, the sooner I can stop worrying about the two of you. She chuckled. But if looks could kill, she'd be a widow in no time. It was bound to happen. Nature, karma, stupidity, they all probably played a part. They slipped back into the barn because they knew I had a date and spent 2 hours together. They got dressed, made themselves as presentable as possible, and left. She slipped out first, and he waited 10 minutes and, grinning, got in the car. As he pulled onto the road, he began to ponder if he could seduce his secretary. The signals were coming in, and he was more than happy to take them. Bob wondered how hard it would be to talk his secretary into the act, and he already knew that Haley was willing to do it. Police lights came on behind him, and he pulled off the road like a good citizen, wondering what had caused them to pull him over. Maybe his taillight had burned out? He thought it odd that he was ordered to stick his hands out of the car, but he did. The policeman came over and pointed the flashlight in Bob's face. Could you shine a light in my eyes? I can't see. Of course, sir. His eyes, still blinded by the flashlight beam, didn't see the stun gun. The tension hit him hard, and he lost control of his bladder. Humiliation was the least of his worries, because he was dragged out of the car and began to be manhandled with an aspid, a curved piece of very flexible metal covered in leather. Bob could hear his bones crunching as the man worked him over professionally. Finally, his hair was pulled, and he nearly passed out from the shock, oblivious to the pain. Sergeant Lester lowered his face to Bob's face, and in a very controlled voice told him how bad his choices had been lately. The man laughed as he let go of Bob's head, and it bounced off the sidewalk. Then a gun flashed in his hand, which landed right on his balls. He immediately lost consciousness. He didn't know how long he lay there. The road was sparsely traveled, especially at night, but finally someone showed up. A local sheriff's deputy took one look at him and called an ambulance. The ambulance driver was shocked by the sight. He had been to Afghanistan and had seen firsthand how prisoners were interrogated there, so he knew that this man had been worked over by a professional. His left arm was broken, and 2 fingers on his right were shattered. His right elbow was shattered. His left leg was broken, as well as his right ankle. Whoever had done this knew how to deliver pain. Strangely, whoever had done this hadn't touched his face, though one eye was swollen shut, the imprint of the glove still on his face. As hardened as he was, when they saw the blood between his legs, he almost fainted again. This guy wouldn't be frolicking for a long time, if ever. He was taken to the hospital, where they worked on him for 3 hours. He lost part of his dignity and a finger, but everything else was patched up. They also discovered an injury they hadn't noticed in the field because of his hair. Someone had kicked him in the head. Hard. They put him in a coma until the swelling in his brain went down, but they weren't sure if there was any damage left. He was identified by his wallet. Damn, the cop thought, going through it and looking at the pictures of a pretty young woman and a little girl. He hoped the guy had good insurance. As dawn broke, the police examined the scene, but found nothing of interest. The only tire tracks on the side of the road belonged to the victim's car. With no evidence, the case was quickly hushed up, and when the man regained consciousness 40 days later, he claimed to remember nothing. The detective in charge of the investigation could have easily realized he was lying, but refused to change the story. This smelled of something personal to the detective. Maybe he was with the wrong wife, and she had a husband who took it seriously. Maybe he was into something he shouldn't have been. Either way, in the absence of the victim's statement and physical evidence, everything was written off as a random act, committed by an unknown person or persons. Amber called me that morning in a panic, crying uncontrollably and mumbling incoherently. I immediately took off work and drove to the hospital. When I saw the condition Bob was in, I almost felt sick to my stomach. As time passed, it became clear that no one knew why he had been attacked, and when he finally woke up, he said he didn't remember anything. He had good insurance, and Amber made sure to pay it every week to keep it active. Her finances were strained to the breaking point, so I evicted them from the apartment they were living in and took her and Belle home. I noticed that everyone in our social circle, except Haley, came around offering to help. One day, I asked Jeff where she was, and he looked at me like he was weighing what he wanted to tell me. They're not here anymore. Lester got a promotion and they moved to the other side of the state. That told me everything I needed to know. It took him almost a year to get well enough to work again. When they got back on their feet and found an apartment, Belle didn't want to leave. It took all of us to calm her down. I went back to my life, still not attached to it. The band quieted down for a while, but gradually got back into a good mood. One day I asked Kathy if they were going to audition someone else for the band, and she seemed wary. We're going to keep the band where it is. It'll be safer that way. The only bright spot in this dreary time was the wedding of Claire and Polly. I walked them down the aisle and wondered if it would work out. I hoped so. They did seem happy. They had a plan. In 3 years, they were going to find a baby to adopt. They seemed to be looking forward to it and were constantly borrowing Belle to practice parenting. Amber came back to me 3 months later. It seemed that Haley had come back to town and had come clean with Amber the first time she'd seen her. Amber slapped her hard enough to knock her down and went to Bob's work. That day quickly turned into a very lousy day because she stormed into his office and caught Bob and his secretary. Everyone on the floor heard the yelling and screaming, and several people went to deal with it. One of them turned out to be the vice president, and Bob's bad day got a lot worse. Amber grabbed Belle and ran to me. I got them back to their old rooms. Bob's day was getting worse and worse. The vice president was about to fire them both until the secretary claimed coercion, which made her practically bulletproof, so Bob left and she stayed. He tried to apologize to Amber, but she wasn't in the mood for forgiveness. He finally snapped and said that if she would just go back to the way she was when we were together, there would be no problem. He gave her an ultimatum: find a group to join, or he would leave her. She laughed so hard she almost cried. How can you leave me? I've already left you in the dust, figuratively speaking. Good luck finding someone to take you on. Most groups have their own underground to report important things. By the end of the week, there won't be a group left in the state that hasn't heard of you. Besides, you usually need a partner to join a group, and you don't have one. I'm filing a statement of irreconcilable differences. Don't be a jerk. Sign the papers. He threatened to make a fuss, but Jeff's quiet words on behalf of the group calmed him down. The divorce had gone through, but that didn't stop him from acting like an ass. It got to the point where he tried to grab Belle and run away. I happened to find him first. Let her go, boy. Stick to your visits. If you run around with her, it'll violate the custody order, and when they catch you, they'll send you to jail. I still have Sergeant Lester's number. I bet if I called him and told him where you'd be doing your time, he could arrange a decent reception and a pleasant stay for you. The wind had gone out of his sails, and he just sat there crying while Belle ran into my arms. She loved him, but the beating and the direction his life had taken had changed him, and she could feel it. He left town without leaving an address. I tracked him down before the wedding, offering to release him from child support if he gave up his parental rights. He tried to detain me, and I grinned. If you can't pay the arrears, chances are you'll spend some time in jail, and the payments will only go up. I can probably get a judge to revoke your license if you get locked up for any length of time. Agree. He agreed to the deal. I tried to hate him for what he had done to his family, but all I felt was sadness for all of them. What brings us to the altar? It started with Belle. She had nightmares, running into my room and climbing into bed. I'd just cuddle her and fall asleep. The first time Amber saw us, she smiled, and around the fourth time, she decided she deserved to be touched too. They ended up being by my side about 4 nights out of 7. There was nothing between us. She was still mourning her marriage, and I didn't have those feelings at the time. It took about 5 months before they calmed down enough to sleep in their beds all night. I was self-employed and could choose my own hours, while Amber had a very tight schedule. I often had to make sure Belle got to school on time, make her breakfast and pick her up in the afternoon. If something happened, and I couldn't, one of our friends would do it. Most often, Claire or Polly, but usually both. It didn't work very well because they held her hostage until almost bedtime. Eventually, we had to make rules and stick to them. I didn't realize I'd been promoted until she went outside with her little friend to pick him up. It was warm, and I rolled down the windows to listen. I heard the girls talking. "Which one is your daddy?" She pointed to my SUV. "That one over there." I made a big show of getting out of the car, helped her in, hugged her, and kissed her on the cheek. She giggled, but hugged me back. That night, I told Amber what she had said after she tucked in for the night. She just smiled and patted my arm. Later, I felt someone slide into my arms. I rolled over to see who it was and realized it was Amber. "Shh, shh," she said. "What are you doing?" "A little daddy time. Now be quiet or we'll have another little girl here." Trying to stay calm. This is where I had to cut out a small chunk of text to make this story fit all ages. 2 hours later, it went on much longer. Long enough for us to fall into an exhausted sleep. We woke up to the sun streaming into the room and Belle standing at the foot of the bed. She crawled over and sat between us. "No fair, Mommy. I want to cuddle too. Tonight, I promise." That pleased Belle, and she started talking about breakfast. It was Saturday, and that meant waffles. I sent her downstairs to get the waffle iron, and that gave us a chance to jump in and change. Belle and Amber made the batter, and I got busy cooking. Amber fried up some bacon. When we were done, we put the dishes in the washer and went to the stable. Usually after cleaning out the stalls, the first thing we did was groom the horses. Jeff told me that most ponies have an insecure temperament. But Blackie was as gentle as a lamb, and Belle was serious about combing out her hair, not stopping until her coat was shiny. Sometimes Amber would braid Belle's hair, and then they would put the same braids in Blackie's hair. I did my gray, and Amber did her horse, a pinto that she saw and just had to get. She was a little pricey, but I bought her anyway. Jeff grinned the whole way as we drove her home in the trailer. "What? Nothing. I guess a horse isn't the only thing she'll be training." "You're crazy. She's too young for me. Besides, she doesn't think of me that way anymore." "Whatever you say." We grilled that night, and they all admired her horse, and I grinned. Claire grinned the widest. "You're a fool for wasting all the years you could have spent with her." Her smile slid a little off her face at my answer. "There was just too much going on back then. I was afraid she'd become an errand girl, and I'd end up hurting both of us." "That was then. And now, Lord knows I'd like to see you happy again. You're a good man, and if my head hadn't been shoved up my ass back then, we'd have 3 or 4 kids by now. Don't miss this chance, Jake." Katie and the other ladies stepped in at different times. When they weren't on me, they were surrounding Amber. I caught up with her as we ate. "So, are we married now, and have 3 kids?" "No, we're at the point where we have Belle and Jessica, and Jake Jr. is on his way." Such a picture made me feel warm and calm. Belle could be pretty serious for a 7-year-old, and one day she came to me while I was in the barn. I knew Amber was watching her from the house. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, but I'd read enough horror stories to keep her on my radar. She climbed up on the stall wall and watched me check a wound the white mare had made somewhere. "I put some antibiotic on it, and if there's no improvement by tomorrow, the vet will come." "Is she all right?" "I think so, baby. I just did the same thing to her that I did to you when you scratched yourself. I put medicine and a Band-Aid on it." She grinned. "You kissed her boo-boo-boo? No. If she ever turns into a sweet little girl, maybe yes. Until then, you're the only one being kissed." "Not even Mommy?" Well, maybe. She's not as small as you, but she's awfully cute. I didn't know, but Amber went down to the barn and we didn't see her. But she heard everything we said. You kiss your mom a lot. Do you really love mom? I really like your mommy. A lot. Can I ask you something? She looked as serious as possible for a 7-year-old. Come on, baby. I want to call you Daddy. My friends say you already are. If that's true, why can't I call you Daddy? Well, it was definitely dusty in here. That's probably why my eyes were starting to water. You can call me Daddy if you want, sweetheart. I'd love to be your daddy. But being a daddy is so much more than just being called that. It means I have to love and protect you until you're grown up. I can handle that, but it requires that you love me back. Her face lit up with one of those beaming smiles I loved so much. Silly Daddy, I already love you. Does that mean you have to love Mommy too? Absolutely. Moms and dads who have sweet girls are supposed to love each other. It's the law. But I won't love her because I have to. I'll love her because I want to. For the rest of our lives. At that moment, we heard a sob and looked around. Amber was on her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. Belle rushed to her, scared to death. Mommy, are you okay? When her voice came back to her, she said that she wasn't just okay. She was very happy. Why are you crying since you're happy? It's a big girl thing, honey. You'll understand someday. Don't you want to spend the night with Aunt Claire and Aunt Polly? Uh-huh. Why? So Mommy can do big girl stuff with Daddy, okay? Good. On the way back after we picked Belle up from the birth center, she was ring shopping. We went to 5 different stores, from the big chains to a couple of small independent stores, before she found what she needed. Fate must have been with us because the ring was the right size, and she wore it right out of the store. I asked her to marry me in the barn. Not the most romantic place, but I got down on the floor next to her and asked anyway, with Belle being our only witness. Then there were several big 3-way hugs and kisses from my girls. Lots and lots and lots of kisses. We had been up most of the night making preparations for the big event in our lives, namely the wedding. Belle told Polly and Claire what had happened, and they smoked the phone lines. By 7, the party was in full swing. Jeff was working the grill with me and grinned. What? Nothing. I'm happy for you. I've got some good news too. Katie is pregnant, 3 months pregnant. Well, good for you. Learn all you can, and you can guide me in a couple years. This started a trend, and within the next 4 months, 2 other ladies became pregnant. They agreed on everything, and were only with their husbands until they were sure they had a child. Jeff also told me that no woman would have children that were not their husbands. They all agreed. The first child wasn't either of them, because Claire and Polly adopted a 4-week-old boy. They were 18 months old, and they said that was pretty fast for the system. They told the boys we had to teach them how to fish and ride, and everything else a boy should know. Amber decided I was getting a little stale and didn't waste any time. She must have been physically fit, because another girl, Jessica, was born, followed 2 years later by a boy, Jake Jr., besides Claire and the band. We had many mainstream friends, but we rarely mingled. 20 years later, we were at the barn watching my daughter Belle introduce her son to the horses. He giggled and reached for them just like she did, so I think he'll be fine. We got behind the wheel and I ended up next to Jeff, with a small gap between us and the other riders. We shared memories and common themes, and I asked him if he thought he would have the same lifestyle when he was in his 70s. Absolutely. There hasn't been a new couple in our group in 16 years, and I think we'll be together until the day we die. Change is coming, Jake. People are already becoming more relaxed. I suspect that in another 20 years it will be quite common, and marriages with multiple partners will be legal. Do you really think so? Think about it. 35 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that men-loving men would become mainstream to the point where no one would care about their orientation, or that they would be allowed to legally marry. There is no good reason to condemn multiple partner relationships other than some religious beliefs and long-standing customs. Do you care how many partners I have? If I have one more, am I exceeding the quota you've set in your head that means we can no longer be friends? I know you didn't like having this lifestyle, and it was your choice. But at the same time, you didn't judge us for our choices. I thought about it as we drove and reminisced. If Claire hadn't deceived the group, would I still be in it? No, I would have left eventually. When Claire said her affair was over, it awakened something in me. However you explain it, it made me feel like I was in one drawn-out affair, fooling myself more than others, and not having the life I wanted. So I ended the affair and lived my life, and I regret nothing. And so, we come to the end of our second installment of a story full of emotion, crisis, and transformation. In this episode, we witnessed the further development of the relationship between characters who sought healing and found new beginnings. Through complex trials and difficulties, in the face of change and choice, they sought to understand themselves and each other. Psychological analysis shows that the process of self-discovery and healing takes time, patience, and a willingness to face painful truths about oneself and one's past. The characters in our story, as they face the consequences of their decisions, learn to forgive themselves and others. They explore the depths of their feelings and desires, seeking to find harmony within themselves and in their relationships. We see Jake facing the past and finding new paths for the future, learning to accept and appreciate moments of joy and happiness, even if they come with difficulties and challenges. His relationships with Amber and Claire, as well as the dynamics within their shared circle of friends, demonstrate the importance of support, understanding, and mutual respect. As this part of the story concludes, we see how life goes on despite the challenges. New generations arrive, bringing with them hope and the possibility of continuing the story of love, friendship, and acceptance. The characters in our story leave behind lessons about the importance of family, overcoming the past, and striving for a better future for themselves and their loved ones. If you enjoyed this part of the story and want to learn more, be sure to visit our Patreon for access to the full story. Your support helps us continue to share compelling stories and journey with you through a world of stories and emotions. Thank you for staying with us, and see you in future stories.